I feel like the modern dream of retirement is, it's sold to us like this glossy, perfectly retouched brochure.
Oh, absolutely. It's totally idealized.
Right. I mean, the narrative is just so ingrained in our culture that we don't even question it anymore. You're supposed to just work yourself to the bone.
They're just grinding through commute after commute.
Exactly, climbing the corporate ladder until you magically hit this arbitrary age of 65, and then you get a gold watch, maybe a sheet cake in the break room with your name misspelled in icing, and then you just stop.
You pack up and head south.
Yeah, you move to a warm climate, buy a really expensive set of golf clubs, and you're just supposed to spend the next 2 decades on a perpetual, endless vacation.
It's positioned as the ultimate finish line. Like, the underlying promise is that once you cross that magical 65 threshold,
Hmm.
all of life's heavy lifting is just over.
Poof, gone.
Right. The responsibilities evaporate, the alarm clock gets thrown in the trash, and you finally get to be entirely selfish with your time.
But, when you actually sit down with people who have reached that so-called finish line, when you look past those, like, curated Instagram photos of sandy beaches, you hear a deeply unsettling story.
Very different reality.
It really is. You hear about crippling financial anxiety because the nest egg isn't stretching nearly as far as they thought it would.
Or inflation eats it alive.
Exactly. And you hear about this profound, crushing loss of purpose. I mean, marriage is absolutely straining and fracturing under the weight of sudden 24-hour-a-day aimlessness.
Because that modern dream, well, it isn't just slightly flawed, it is fundamentally broken.
It's a trap.
It's a manufactured concept. And more importantly, true financial freedom, like the kind that actually gives you lasting peace and unshakable stability. That isn't a modern Wall Street invention.
No, it wasn't designed in some corporate boardroom.
Not at all. It was perfected thousands of years ago in ancient foundational texts.
So welcome to this deep dive, because today we aren't looking at Wall Street predictions. We aren't chasing the latest crypto trends or whatever.
No standard cookie-cutter advice here.
Right. We've pulled together this massive stack of historical texts, some deep psychological insights, and primarily the foundational blueprints found in ancient biblical wisdom.
And our mission today is to distill all of that into a single battle-tested system.
We're basically handing you a financial architecture that was perfected millennia ago. These are the foundational laws of wealth.
We are passing down a strategy designed to absolutely guarantee your freedom and build a completely famine-proof retirement.
Yeah, we are stepping into the role of your financial mentors today. We're speaking directly to you, the listener, about how to radically restructure your life.
The goal is that you are never again at the mercy of, an economic downturn or a sudden layoff.
Or a global crisis.
Exactly. Or this cultural myth that falsely tells you your best, most productive years are somehow behind you. We are going to build a fortress.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can talk about the architecture of this fortress, before we even outline the solution, we have to deliver some brutal honesty.
We have to diagnose the disease first.
Right. We need to hold up a mirror to where most people currently stand financially. And usually it's in a place that feels incredibly warm and comfortable, but it's actually a ticking time bomb.
You're talking about the middle-class trap.
The ultimate illusion of comfort. Let's really dig into the mechanics of this, because I used to think the treadmill analogy perfectly described it.
The treadmill.
Yeah, you're running on a treadmill, you're sweating, your heart rate is up, you're grinding out a 50-hour week. By all external measures, you are putting in maximum effort.
Right.
But when you look down, you haven't moved a single inch. You're burning massive amounts of energy just to stay in the exact same spot. But the more I look at the ancient wisdom, the more I realize the treadmill doesn't quite capture the danger.
No, because the treadmill implies that you're at least maintaining your health.
Yeah.
The middle-class trap is far more insidious than that.
Exactly. It's more like having a massive, high-powered water hose filling a bucket, but you've drilled dozens of tiny holes in the bottom.
Oh, that's a great visual.
Right. Your salary is the water, and the holes are the upgraded car lease, the 5 streaming subscriptions, the slightly nicer zip code, the private school tuition.
Constant upgrades.
Yeah. And you are completely obsessed with turning up the water pressure. You're killing yourself to get that next promotion or bonus, but you completely ignore the fact that your bucket is structurally incapable of holding a single drop of water.
That is the perfect visualization of the trap.
Eh.
And the brutal honesty here is that the middle-class trap is arguably the most dangerous financial position you could possibly be in.
More dangerous than poverty.
In a psychological sense, yes.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you were in abject poverty, The crisis is glaringly obvious. The pain is daily.
Right, the need for change is undeniable.
Exactly. You know you're in an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
But the middle-class trap, it seduces you into absolute complacency.
Because you have a nice kitchen.
Right. You go out for sushi on Fridays, it feels safe. And that deceptive feeling of safety, it's exactly what silently keeps you stuck, just bleeding out wealth month after month.
You earn enough to live comfortably, but as you get older and your income rises, well, your expenses rise just as fast.
You get a 10% raise, and suddenly your lifestyle inflates by 12%.
Exactly. Your actual wealth building completely stagnates. You look incredibly wealthy on the outside. You have the right clothes, the right cars. But if the paycheck stops next Tuesday,
If the company downsizes, or there's a medical emergency,
the entire facade collapses within a month.
because you don't actually own your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Your employer owns it. Your lender owns it. You are simply renting the appearance of wealth.
Wow. Renting the appearance of wealth.
And this brings us to an ancient Hebrew concept that perfectly diagnoses the psychology behind this trap. It's the concept of the atzel.
The atzel.
Yeah.
Commonly translated as the sluggard, right?
Yes.
Yes.
But we need to completely reframe how we think about that word.
How so?
Well, when modern people hear the word sluggard or lazy, we immediately picture someone who just refuses to work.
Yeah, like a teenager lying on the couch playing video games all day.
Exactly. Entirely unmotivated. But the ancient wisdom from the book of Proverbs, specifically Proverbs 6, paints a chillingly different, highly sophisticated picture of laziness.
Okay, I'm listening.
The Atzel isn't necessarily unemployed. In fact, in today's world, the Atzel might be a high-earning corporate executive.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they might work 60 hours a week. They might be the top salesperson in their firm.
So where is the laziness? If they're grinding out 60 hours a week, how are they a sluggard?
Their laziness is not in their labor. They are habitually idle in their financial discipline.
Oh, wow.
They work incredibly hard to generate the income, but the moment that paycheck hits their bank account, they become completely passive. They advocate all responsibility for managing the wealth they just broke their backs to create.
Habitually idle in their discipline. That cuts deep.
It does.
It's the person who will spend 40 hours negotiating a massive contract for their boss, but won't spend 40 minutes on a Tuesday night sitting at the kitchen table with their spouse to write a budget.
Precisely. And Proverbs describes the behavioral pattern of the Atzel with this beautifully poetic, yet terrifyingly accurate phrase. It says, "A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest."
A little sleep. Notice the repetition of the word little.
Yes, this is the language of small, seemingly insignificant compromises.
It's the death by a thousand cuts. It's never one massive, catastrophic mistake that ruins the middle class.
It's almost never taking your life savings to Vegas and putting it on black.
Right. It's the just a little impulse purchase at Target.
And the rationalization that comes with it. We've worked so hard this quarter, we deserve just a little vacation. So you put $4,000 on a credit card.
Or it's just a little delay in fully funding that retirement account because, the kids' travel sports are expensive this year and you tell yourself you'll have more margin next year.
Which you won't. It forms a deeply ingrained pattern of delay. You take these constant little micro breaks from financial discipline, and over 20 years, those micro breaks compound into a completely wasted financial life.
And the inevitable consequence of this. The ancient texts don't pull any punches. They warn that because of these micro-compromises, poverty will come upon you like an armed robber and scarcity like an armed man.
That imagery is incredibly intentional.
I love that imagery because an armed robber doesn't send you a calendar invite. An armed robber doesn't politely announce themselves at the door. It is sudden, it is violent, and it is entirely overwhelming.
You lose your job, or the economy shifts, and suddenly that beautiful, curated middle-class life is violently stripped away.
Because there was absolutely no foundation underneath it.
Right. And the Atzel is always shocked by the financial crisis. They play the victim. They blame the economy. They blame the government. They blame their boss.
But the brutal truth is the poverty wasn't an accident.
No, it was mathematically inevitable based on their pattern of micro-compromises.
So if the middle-class trap is a leaky bucket and the Atzel behavior is what drills the holes, how do we step off the treadmill? What is the mindset shift required to break this cycle?
Well, the ancient wisdom points us away from human economic systems and points us directly to the ultimate example of foresight in nature.
Which is?
Proverbs 6 gives a direct command. "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise."
We are supposed to take financial advice from an insect.
A highly organized, incredibly disciplined insect. The text explicitly tells us to observe the ant. And what is the defining structural characteristic of the ant colony? The text says it has no commander, no overseer or ruler.
Meaning the ant is entirely self-motivated.
Exactly. It does not need external pressure to do the right thing.
That is a massive distinction. I mean, most people only change their financial behavior when external pressure forces them to.
Like a collection agency calling.
Right. They only start budgeting when they hit rock bottom. They only cut back on spending when the credit card gets declined at the grocery store. They need an overseer.
But the ant acts out of pure internal wisdom. And that wisdom is rooted in one fundamental truth. The ant understands the seasons of wealth. The text continues, "Yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest." The ant gathers its food in the harvest, in the summer, because it recognizes a biological and environmental reality that the Atzal completely ignores.
That the current abundance is temporary.
Yes. The ant knows, deep in its DNA, that winter is coming.
That is such a powerful framework for you listening right now. I don't care if you're 25 or 55. If you are in your earning years, you are in your summer.
You have a paycheck coming in, you have physical energy.
You have the mental acuity and the opportunity to generate capital. You must recognize the season you are in. You have to work diligently gathering the surplus and completely avoid the arrogant, foolish assumption that your current income will just last forever.
Summer is not the time to consume everything the field produces. That is the mentality of a consumer, not a builder.
Summer is the time to gather.
Because the winter of retirement, the season when you either physically cannot work or you choose to step away from your primary income source, that winter will inevitably arrive.
And if you've consumed all your harvests in the summer to fund a flashy lifestyle, your winter will be marked by bitter desperation.
And total dependence on others.
No, wait, I have to play devil's advocate here, because if we are genuinely looking at this through a biblical lens, someone is going to raise a theological objection.
Okay, let's hear it.
Doesn't the Bible also heavily emphasize trusting God for the future? I mean, doesn't Jesus explicitly say in Matthew 6, "Do not worry about tomorrow"? He points to the lilies of the field and the birds of the air and says they don't sow or reap, yet they're provided for.
That's a very common objection.
Right. So isn't aggressively hoarding away money for the winter showing a massive lack of faith? Aren't we supposed to just trust that provision will be there when we need it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that this objection is actually a fundamental misunderstanding of what faith is. Saving diligently is not a lack of faith. It is obedience to divine wisdom. God expects us to be faithful stewards of the resources He actively entrusts to us. The ancient texts teach from page 1 that God owns absolutely everything.
The earth is the Lord's and everything in it.
Exactly. We are not owners, we are simply managers. We are stewards.
So the money in my bank account right now isn't actually mine. I'm just the portfolio manager for the king.
That's it. And a good portfolio manager doesn't recklessly waste the owner's capital, assuming the owner will just magically replenish the account every time it hits zero.
That isn't faith. That is demanding a bailout.
Brilliantly said. When you save consistently, you are not doubting God's future provision. You are honoring the intelligence, the capacity, and the specific instruction He gave you to manage today's provision wisely.
Wow.
Faith without diligent stewardship is presumption. It is arrogance masquerading as trust. The ant doesn't worry about winter, the ant prepares for it. Proper, disciplined preparation mathematically removes the anxiety that Jesus was warning against.
That shifts the entire paradigm. If I'm managing someone else's money, I have a fiduciary duty to not squander it on depreciating assets.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we know we need to step off the treadmill, plug the holes in the bucket. We know we need the internal, unprompted motivation of the ant, and we need to desperately recognize our summer. But how exactly do we do that? Motivation isn't enough. Willpower dissipates. We need a concrete, actionable system.
And the most robust, battle-tested system in human history is found in the ancient story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. We call this the Joseph 20% rule.
I am obsessed with this story. It is quite literally one of the most brilliant macroeconomic strategies ever recorded.
It is a masterclass in economic theory and human psychology. Let's set the stage. Joseph, a Hebrew slave who's in prison, is suddenly elevated to the second most powerful position in the entire Egyptian empire.
Overnight.
Why? Because he interprets a terrifying dream that Pharaoh had. God gives Joseph the foresight to see that Egypt is about to experience 7 years of extreme, unprecedented agricultural abundance.
A massive historic summer.
But that summer will be followed immediately by 7 years of brutal, devastating, landscape-altering famine, the ultimate winter.
A famine so severe that the text says the years of plenty will be completely forgotten. Now, if a modern politician or a modern financial advisor were put in Joseph's shoes, what would they do?
Oh, they would hold a press conference.
Right, they'd say, hey everyone, times are really good right now, but our economic models show a severe downturn coming in about 7 years. So please try to tighten your belts, spend a little less on chariots this year, and try to save whatever is left over at the end of the month.
And if Joseph had done that, Egypt would have starved to death.
Why?
Because Joseph understood a fundamental law of human nature, something economists today call Parkinson's law.
Okay, break that down.
Parkinson's law states that work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion. But in finance, the corollary is that human desires will always expand to consume all available resources. If you wait to save whatever's left over after you've funded your lifestyle, your hobbies, your vacations, there will never, ever be anything left over. Your lifestyle will magically inflate to swallow every single dollar of that extreme abundance.
So Joseph didn't rely on the voluntary willpower of the Egyptian citizens.
Not at all. He didn't suggest a budget. He established a strict, concrete mathematical system, a non-negotiable discipline.
What was the math?
He decreed that during the 7 years of plenty, exactly 1/5, 20% of the entire harvest was to be taken off the top, collected, and put in his secure storehouses.
He seized the surplus.
He seized the surplus before the spending could even happen. This is the crux of the strategy. This 20% storage system is the ancient foundational secret to a famine-proof retirement.
It entirely removes human emotion and human frailty from the equation.
It doesn't rely on you waking up feeling disciplined. It relies on structure and systems.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we can take this ancient agricultural practice and map it directly onto our modern digital lives.
Yes, let's do that.
Joseph's 20% system is the exact ancient equivalent of a modern automated payroll deduction.
That is the perfect modern translation.
If you want to build a storehouse today, you don't do it by promising yourself you'll be good this month.
No, promises fail.
You log into your HR portal or you call your bank and you set up your finances so that 20% of your gross income is automatically diverted into your investments, your index funds, or your high-yield savings before that money ever even hits your primary checking account.
You never even see it.
You treat that 20% like a draconian, untouchable tax that is paid directly to your future self. Because it's fully automated, it is completely insulated from lifestyle creep.
Your brain never registers it as available capital.
Exactly. You never even have the psychological opportunity to spend it on a nicer car or a bigger house.
And implementing this 20% rule does something deeply profound to your character over time. We often think of saving as just a dry, mathematical exercise moving numbers from one spreadsheet column to another. But the ancient wisdom teaches that saving is actually stewardship training. It is spiritual formation.
Oh, I like that.
Every single dollar you aggressively set aside teaches you the art of discipline. It trains your mind and your heart to delay gratification, which is the cornerstone of all adult maturity.
So true.
Remember, as a steward, God doesn't multiply financial disobedience. He multiplies faithful management. By faithfully, relentlessly managing that 20%, you are proving your trustworthiness. You are actively preparing your character to handle much greater responsibilities in the future.
Okay, I love the theory. Automate 20%. Boom, done. But I know for a fact that there is a massive, incredibly painful roadblock here for the average listener.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
Someone is driving in their car right now listening to us, and their blood pressure is rising. They are thinking, you guys are out of your minds. I would love to save 20% of my income. I really would. But by the time I pay my massively inflated mortgage, my 2 car notes, my crushing student loans, and the minimum payments on my 3 credit cards, there is barely 2% left over to buy groceries, let alone 20% for some magical storehouse.
And that listener's frustration is entirely valid, which brings us to the harshest, most uncompromising reality of wealth building.
May it on us.
To successfully execute the Joseph 20% rule, you must ruthlessly, violently eradicate debt from your life.
There it is.
You cannot build a storehouse for your future while you are simultaneously paying someone else for your past. The math simply does not work. Proverbs 22.7 gives us a sobering, terrifying warning about this. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender.
Slave. The text doesn't say the borrower is a valued customer of the lender, it says slave.
The literal ancient Hebrew word used in that proverb is ebed. It translates directly to bondservant or slave. We need to let the weight of that word sink in.
It's heavy.
This is not a colorful metaphor. Debt is not just a math problem where you're losing a few percentage points to interest every month. It is a deep spiritual problem. It is a literal invisible chain wrapped around your life.
Because when you willingly go into consumer debt, you have voluntarily surrendered your freedom.
Your future labor, the sweat off your brow next Tuesday, is already owned by a bank in another state.
Think about what that does to the trajectory of your life. Let's talk about the real-world application of being an ebed. If your future income is already legally spoken for by a lender, you completely lose your freedom to respond to a calling.
You are entirely stuck.
You can't quit a toxic job that is destroying your mental health because you have a $700 car payment due on the 1st.
You can't move across the country for an amazing, risky new opportunity.
You can't start that business you've dreamed of. And most importantly, from a stewardship perspective, you can't be radically generous when you see a genuine need in your community, because that money isn't yours to give. It already belongs to MasterCard.
You are an ebed, a bondservant to the credit card company. So, the absolute first step in this entire journey, before you even think about complex investments, is breaking those chains.
And that requires a visceral reaction.
You have to get radically, painfully uncomfortable. It means having the Tuesday night budget meeting that ends in tears.
It means you sell the car you love and drive a beater.
It means you cut the lifestyle to the bone, you cancel the vacations, you stop eating out, and you attack the debt with a level of intensity that makes your friends and family think you've lost your mind.
You have to reclaim your freedom at all costs.
Period.
All right, so let's walk through the timeline. Let's say I've done the painful work, I've sold the car, I paid off the credit cards, I am debt-free, and I finally have that 20% flowing automatically into my storehouse.
Congratulations, you're in the wealth building phase.
But I want to pause and warn the listener here, because this specific phase has a psychological hurdle that absolutely destroys so many well-meaning, disciplined people.
It really does.
We refer to it in our mentorship materials as the hurdle of the first $100,000.
Ah, yes. The whisper of compounding. This is where the battle of the mind truly begins.
Exactly. I mean, yes, it is entirely a mental battle. Our mentorship materials refer to this specific phenomenon. Compounding whispers before it roars.
Yes.
In the beginning, when you are faithfully, month after month, putting away that 20%, the growth feels painfully, agonizingly slow.
It's brutal.
You look at your investment account after 2 years of extreme bleeding sacrifice. You haven't been on a vacation, you haven't bought new clothes, and you've got maybe $20,000 in the account. And it grew by maybe $1,000 in interest. It feels utterly pointless. It feels like you're shoveling snow in a raging blizzard.
This psychological frustration is exactly what Proverbs 13.11 is addressing when it says, "Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow."
Notice the phrase, little by little.
Building real, generational wealth requires immense, almost unnatural patience. When you are grinding from $0 to $100,000, your own manual contributions, the physical money you are sweating to put in from your paycheck, make up the vast, overwhelming majority of the account's growth.
The interest is just a tiny, barely audible whisper.
And this is the exact moment where most people quit. They look at the math, they look at their sacrifice, they say, this isn't working, life is too short, and they revert right back to the asshole behavior.
They go buy a boat on credit.
Exactly.
But if you can just hold on, if you can just survive the whisper phase, because once you cross that magical $100,000 threshold, the math fundamentally shifts.
Reaching the $100K mark is the ultimate proof of concept.
It proves you have mastered this system.
You've proven your stewardship over a substantial sum. And mathematically, this is the inflection point where your money stops being just a static pile of cash and literally transforms into an employee.
An employee that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, without ever taking a sick day, demanding a raise, or going on strike.
The interest starts generating its own interest in meaningful chunks. The growth begins to accelerate exponentially. The whisper slowly turns into a roar.
But this raises a terrifying scenario. Okay, so I've survived the whisper phase. I'm out of debt. I hit the $100K, and the compound interest is finally roaring. The bucket is holding water.
What if it's good?
But now I am terrified. I have all my eggs in this 120% basket, and what happens if the market crashes like it did in 2008? What if there's a global pandemic and the economy shuts down? A decade of brutal, tear-inducing discipline could be wiped out in a week. How did the ancients handle systemic market crashes? How do we safeguard this massive storehouse we are building so we don't lose our minds worrying about it?
Protecting that hard-won momentum requires a completely crisis-proof structure. It's not enough to just play defense and save. You have to deploy that capital wisely so that a single economic storm doesn't wipe out a decade of discipline.
So where do we look for that structure?
To understand how to protect wealth on a macro scale, we look to King Solomon. Historically, Solomon is recognized in the biblical texts as the wealthiest man to ever live.
But he didn't just hoard it.
No, Solomon didn't just accumulate a massive pile of gold. He was an architectural genius when it came to wealth. He designed a specific mathematical formula for preserving wealth across generations, immune to local disasters.
He didn't just build a storehouse, he built an impenetrable fortress around it.
He did. We find his exact blueprint for this fortress in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 11, verse 2. He writes this explicit instruction: invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land.
He knew bad things were inevitable.
Solomon, despite all his wealth, was deeply pragmatic. He understood that the future is inherently unpredictable. Disasters happen, famines strike, markets crash, trade routes get blocked.
So extreme diversification is not just a piece of good advice for the overly cautious. It is a divine mandate for wealth preservation.
Exactly. And from this deep wisdom, we derive the structural foundation of what we call King Solomon's portfolio. It is built entirely on the 33% rule.
The 33% rule.
If you want a famine-proof retirement, you must memorize this structure. It is non-negotiable. The 33% rule divides your accumulated wealth into 3 distinct, equal categories. It is a 3-legged stool.
Let's break down the mechanics of the 33% rule. What's the first leg?
The first component is 33% in land. This represents tangible, productive, physical assets. In Solomon's ancient agrarian economy, this meant owning agricultural fields, vineyards, and olive groves.
Then today.
Today, this perfectly translates to real estate, residential rentals, commercial properties, farmland, or any physical property that produces ongoing revenue.
Now, wait, I have to push back here. 33% in land. Look at today's housing market. Interest rates are high, inventory is low. Most young people listening to this can't even afford a basic starter home in a decent suburb, let alone buy vineyards and olive groves to protect their portfolio.
That is a very real modern challenge.
Yeah. How does a regular person with 50 grand saved execute this ancient rule today without getting laughed out of a bank?
Well, the principle of the 33% rule remains accessible through modern financial instruments. If you cannot afford direct ownership of a multifamily property, you utilize real estate investment trusts, or REITs. You buy fractional shares of commercial real estate.
Or house hacking.
Exactly, where you buy a duplex, live in one side, and rent out the other. The vehicle changes, but the principle is mandatory. Why? Because 33% in land is the ultimate historical hedge against inflation.
When a government prints money and paper currency loses its purchasing power, tangible dirt, brick, and lumber hold their worth.
You can physically touch it. It cannot vanish into the digital ether during a tech crash.
Okay, that makes sense. Tangibility is the defense against inflation. So what is the second leg of the stool?
The second component is 33% in business. This category is your portfolio's growth vehicle. These are your active, dynamic, income-producing assets.
For Solomon, this was merchant ships.
Right, controlling international trade routes and funding expeditions. Today, your 33% in business means owning equities, investing heavily in broad market index funds, participating in private business partnerships, or literally owning and operating your own company.
This is the roaring engine of your portfolio?
It is designed to compound wealth, rapidly and aggressively outpace inflation over decades.
So we have 33% in land for hard stability and inflation protection, and we have 33% in business for aggressive growth and compounding. What's the final piece of the 33% rule?
The final and arguably most misunderstood component is 33% in liquidity. This means immediately accessible, highly liquid reserves.
What did that look like for Solomon?
For Solomon, this was literal gold, silver, and precious stones kept physically in the real treasury. Today, your 33% in liquidity means substantial high-yield cash reserves, treasury bills, physical precious metals, or a massive, robust 6 to 12-month emergency safety net.
I can hear the modern financial advisors screaming at their podcasts right now, keeping a third of your net worth in cash or near cash equivalents. In a high inflation environment, they would argue that cash is trash. They'd say you are losing money every day to inflation by holding that much liquidity. Contrast Solomon's 33% rule with the standard Wall Street advice we all hear.
Wall Street traditionally pushes the 60-40 portfolio, 60% in stocks, 40% in bonds. But notice the fatal flaw in that model. It is entirely comprised of paper assets.
It exists only on computer screens.
If the global financial system suffers a catastrophic shock, a liquidity crisis, a massive banking failure, both of those paper assets can and will plummet simultaneously. But with Solomon's 33% rule, you have built a three-legged stool.
If the stock market leg absolutely breaks in half, the stool still stands firmly because you have physical, income-producing land and deep liquid cash to hold you up.
And let's take it a step further, because that 33% liquidity isn't just for cowering in a bunker playing defense. It's actually the ultimate offensive weapon.
Explain that.
Think about the mechanism of a market crash. When a disaster strikes the land, exactly as Solomon warned, asset prices crash, real estate plunges, stocks go on a fire sale, the masses panic and sell at the bottom.
But if you are holding 33% in liquidity...
You aren't panicking, you are sleeping like a baby.
Yeah.
You have the dry powder ready to step into the market and buy incredible generational assets at a massive discount. You become the provider of capital when the rest of the market is desperate for it.
Wow. The 33% rule guarantees that you are never, ever forced to sell your land or your business at the bottom of a market out of desperation to feed your family.
That is the genius of the architecture. 33% in land, 33% in business, and 33% in liquidity. It is a timeless, crisis-proof structure that has survived empires rising and falling.
So we've covered a massive amount of ground. We've talked about the painful reality of escaping the leaky bucket of the middle-class trap. We've embraced the absolute necessity of the automated Joseph 20% rule. We've weathered the agonizing slow whisper of the first $100, and we've successfully built King Solomon's 33% diversified fortress. The storehouse is full. The winter provisions are secured. But this brings us to the ultimate, most profound question of this entire deep dive.
Now that the financial storehouse is built, what is it actually for?
Exactly.
That is the most important question of your life, because if the entire goal of this arduous, decades-long process is just to amass a giant pile of money so you can spend your final 30 years in selfish, isolated indulgence, then we have completely missed the biblical mandate.
We failed the stewardship test.
To understand the true purpose of the storehouse, we have to violently dismantle the modern retirement myth we opened the show with.
The vacation paradigm, the glossy brochure.
Exactly. We need to look at the history of where this idea came from. The idea that retirement equals a perpetual state-funded or self-funded vacation is actually a secular, cynical political invention. It is not an ancient human tradition.
Really? Where did it start?
It was created in the 1880s by the German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck.
Let's dive deep into this because the mechanism here is fascinating. Why did Bismarck invent retirement?
It was pure political calculus. Germany was rapidly industrializing, and Bismarck was facing a rising tide of Marxist and socialist unrest among the working class. To stave off a revolution and buy the loyalty of the populace, he instituted the first state-sponsored pension system.
Sounds nice on paper.
But here is the catch. He set the retirement age to 65, initially 70, then lowered to 65. But in the 1880s, the average life expectancy for working-class male was around 40 to 45 years old.
Wait, what? So it was a rigged game from the start?
Entirely. It was a brilliant, cynical political tool. The state promised a pension, knowing full well that the vast majority of workers would literally drop dead in the factories decades before they ever collected a single pfennig.
Unbelievable.
He wanted to move older, slower workers out of the labor force to make room for younger, cheaper labor without causing a riot. It had absolutely nothing to do with human flourishing, dignity, or rest. It was an economic valve.
And yet, over the last century, Western consumer culture hijacked this cynical political tool, combined it with modern medicine extending our lifespans to 85, and sold us the toxic idea that the ultimate reward for a life of hard work is total irrelevance.
Irrelevance wrapped in comfort. But the modern psychological and sociological data is devastatingly clear. A retirement focused solely on endless leisure, playing golf 5 days a week, and self-indulgence leads directly to spiritual lethargy, profound boredom, cognitive decline, and eventually deep depression.
Human beings were simply not designed by our Creator to consume oxygen and resources for 30 years without contributing back to the tribe.
We are built for purpose. So what is a biblical model for the winter of our lives? If it isn't a 30-year vacation, what is it? We find the blueprint in the specific instructions given to the Levites in the book of Numbers, chapter 8.
The Levites, the priestly tribe.
Yes. The Levites were the tribe entirely dedicated to the service of the tabernacle. the center of ancient Israel's worship. They were the ones doing the grueling, incredibly heavy physical labor of dismantling, carrying across the desert, and reassembling the massive wooden pillars, heavy bronze altars, and thick curtains of the sanctuary.
It was bone-crushing, physically demanding manual labor.
And the ancient text gives them a very specific mandatory mandate regarding their age and their service.
It does. Numbers 8 explicitly states that at age 50, the Levites were mandated to retire from the heavy, physical, manual labor of moving the tabernacle.
God, in his profound mercy and design, recognized human physical limitations. He didn't want his servants used, abused, and worked until their spines gave out and they dropped dead in the sand. So at 50, their primary heavy lifting career came to a hard stop.
But, and this is the crucial turning point for our listeners, they didn't go to the beach. They didn't move to a Levite retirement village in the Sinai Peninsula and play ancient shuffleboard.
Not at all. The text explicitly says that after age 50, they transitioned their role. They shifted from heavy lifting to providing spiritual oversight. They moved into what we can translate as guard duty.
Guard duty. I love that.
They were tasked with protecting the sanctuary, mentoring the younger, stronger generation of Levites who are now doing the heavy lifting, and ensuring the spiritual and structural integrity of the entire community. They provided the deep memory, the institutional wisdom, and the calm vigilance that the younger, stronger, more arrogant men lacked.
It was a redirection of service, not a cessation of purpose. This is the entire point of the storehouse. The winter of your life is not a time to clock out of humanity. It is a time to leverage the massive amount of wisdom, capital, and experience you've accumulated over your summer.
Look at the promise in Psalm 92.15. It boldly declares that the righteous will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green. Your later years, your winter, are meant to be a season of immense, unparalleled fruitfulness.
Retirement is supposed to be a life cycle Sabbath.
It is a dedicated time to step back from the frantic, exhaustingly paced rat race of income generation so that you can finally live coram Deo.
Let's explain coram Deo because that is a massive concept.
It is a Latin phrase that literally translates to before the face of God. To live coram Deo means you live your entire life in the presence of, under the authority of, and to the honor and glory of God.
You live for an audience of one.
Imagine sitting at your kitchen table, making a financial decision, and visibly seeing the creator of the universe sitting across from you. That is coram Deo, your financial storehouse, the 20% you saved, the 33% portfolio you build, buys back your time so you can spend your winter living coram Deo.
You pass down wisdom, you freely fund kingdom work, and you provide an unshakable pillar of stability to your family and your local community.
This completely flips the script on modern finance. It changes the entire motivation. We aren't building this massive Solomon-esque storehouse just to buy a bigger boat or upgrade to first class. We are strategically buying back our time so we can do our true, most important life's work.
So what does this guard duty look like practically? For someone listening today who is 55 or 60, approaching their winter with a full storehouse, what is their job description?
What's fascinating here is that the New Testament doesn't leave us guessing. It gives us an exact, explicit job description for this phase of life. It's found in the book of Titus, in what we often refer to as the Titus II curriculum.
The Titus II curriculum. Let's dig into that.
Yes. The text explicitly calls upon older men and older women to become the spiritual and emotional immune system of their community. Older men are directly instructed to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-controlled, and sound in faith, in love, and in endurance.
They are called to actively mentor the younger men by their lived example.
And older women are called to be reverent in the way they live, to teach what is good, and to intentionally train the younger women in how to love their husbands and children, and how to manage their lives with wisdom.
It's an intentional intergenerational transfer of wisdom. Think about the power of this. When you are financially free, when the Joseph 20% rule has done its work, you have the ultimate, most coveted luxury in the modern world. Absolute control of your time.
You have the time to sit at a coffee shop for 3 hours with a struggling young couple on the brink of divorce and share the painful successes and failures of your own marriage.
You have the time to volunteer your 30 decades of high-level executive corporate experience to a local nonprofit that is desperately trying to change lives but lacks operational structure.
You have the liquid resources from your 33% portfolio to quietly pay a single mother's rent for a year or fully sponsor a medical missionary without anyone ever knowing your name.
That is true guard duty. Guard duty is actively protecting the next generation from the mistakes you made. It is using your hard-won financial freedom as a weapon to bless others and push back the darkness in your community.
The wealth you accumulated in your summer wasn't just for your personal security. It was a divine tool to empower your true vocation in winter. Your corporate career may formally end at 65, but your calling to bear fruit endures until your final breath.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? Let's trace the journey we've mapped out today because it requires immediate action. It starts with brutal honesty.
You have to look at your bank accounts today and recognize the incredibly dangerous middle-class trap.
You must violently break out of the the sluggard behavior of small, rationalized financial compromises that are drilling holes in your bucket.
You must adopt the internal, unprompted wisdom of the ant, recognizing your current summer of earning capacity so you can frantically and diligently prepare for your inevitable winter.
It requires implementing hard systems. You have to enforce the non-negotiable Joseph 20% rule, automating your savings off the top before you have the chance to consume it.
You have to undergo the pain of breaking the spiritual and literal chains of debt so your future labor isn't owned by a corporate lender.
You must grit your teeth and survive the agonizing, slow whisper of compounding until you finally break through that first $100,000 barrier.
And once you build that wealth, you refuse to be naive about the future. You protect it with King Solomon's robust 33% diversification, 33% in tangible land, 33% in compounding business, and 33% in offensive liquidity.
And you do all of this sacrifice, not so you can vanish onto a golf course in Florida and become irrelevant, but so you can fundamentally redirect your final decades into purposeful, fruitful, community-altering guard duty.
Ultimately, money is nothing more than a spiritual thermometer. How you handle your finances, where you direct your capital, reveals what you truly trust and what you deeply fear.
It reveals whether you arrogantly believe you are the owner of your life or whether you humbly accept that you are a steward of the king's resources.
I want to challenge you to take action today. Today, not next week, no matter how small the first step is.
Go into your bank app and cancel a streaming subscription. Put an extra $100 toward your smallest credit card debt. Log into your HR portal and automate just 5% of your income into savings if you can't stomach the full 20% yet.
Plug one hole in the bucket, step off the treadmill, start building your foundational storehouse today.
The ancient principles still work flawlessly. The math hasn't changed in 3,000 years, and human nature hasn't changed either.
As we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with a lingering, slightly disruptive concept to mull over on your own.
We've talked extensively about building your storehouse to protect yourself and to fund your guard duty.
Yeah.
But consider this. What if the massive wealth you are so diligently, painfully building right now isn't actually meant for your comfort at all?
What if your future winter storehouse is the exact specific financial provision God intends to use to answer someone else's desperate midnight prayer 10 years from now?
Are you ready to be the answer to that prayer?